Morning. Here we are, live again on a Monday morning, and ready to crack on after bank holiday. So we skipped a week, didn't we? And now we're back live again. So it's the Monday morning property finance Q&A. And what do we do on a Monday morning property finance Q&A? Well, unsurprisingly, you ask some property finance questions and then I answer them. Been doing this as a regular thing for over a year now, since lockdown one, actually, since that started. And so people seem to like it, so I'll keep doing it. So jump on, answer your questions. Sorry, you ask the questions, I'll answer them. That's how it works. And we'll crack on. Just come back from Leeds, spent 4 days there running my advanced training program, the Ninja Investor program. And actually, it's the first one I've been able to run in 2021. So that was great to get out and actually see people. Remember when we used to be able to do that? Well, it's all coming back. So that was really good. And that's sort of my second level, my advanced level training. And so a bunch of people jumped on that and we had a great time. They learned some really counterintuitive ways to find, finance and then refinance properties that pretty much no one else is that interested in buying, which is a bit of a revelation in times when properties are going over asking price in many cases. But it's a question of looking for the stuff that most people don't really want, and that's what I teach people to do. So I've got my entry-level event, the Buy-Refurb-Refinance Summit, coming up this Saturday, 15th of May in Birmingham. And if you fancy coming along there, then there's the link I've just put in there. I actually put it in the advert for the live Q&A, but realised I'd made a typo. I'd forgot the dot after www, and someone kindly pointed that out. So it's in the chat. So www.brrsummit.com is the way to get yourselves along there for this coming Saturday, if you live not too far from Birmingham and you don't happen to have a lot on in Birmingham. It'll be the princely sum of £47 plus VAT. Pay for your car parking, pay for your lunch as well on that. And you get 3 great speakers, well, 2 plus me. We've got Sue Sims talking about why social housing is a great strategy to consider for your property investing. And we've actually got a RICS valuer, Christine Janaway, coming to share with us how RICS valuers think, because they don't always think like investors expect them to think. So be great to get the inside track from Christine. Particularly looking forward to that. And I'll be sharing some stuff about if you're going to buy a refurb refinance, what are the rules, what you need to be doing, more just as importantly, what you need to avoid doing if you're going to make that work better for you. So feel free to come along. And if Birmingham's a bit too far for you, well, I did London a couple of weeks ago, but I'm going to be in, where is it? Bristol on the 6th of June and Leeds on the 4th of July. And if either of those appeals to you, got some great speakers lined up for Bristol and Leeds as well. If you hop onto the link given there, brrsummit.com, then you'll see who they are. So there we are. That's what I've been up to, what I'm going to be up to. In the meantime, I can answer some questions, but of course, I need you to actually ask them before I can. As ever, been busy answering questions in the numerous property Facebook groups that I'm in. Clive says, morning. Yes, looking to see you. Yeah, 2 weeks' time, actually. So I'm going to be doing another 4-day Ninja Investor Program in-person event in Heathrow. Starts not this Thursday coming, next Thursday, the 20th. Going to be there till Sunday. And Clive, you're already booked on, so looking forward to seeing you there. A few more people saying morning, good morning. So hit me with a question is the thing. In the meantime, I'll tell you about a question that I saw in a post on one of the Facebook groups. So someone's looking at buying a leasehold flat to rent out. Looks a decent rental income, and gave a few more details, but then said one bit of information: it's got an 86-year lease. So in other words, the lease that was originally granted however many years ago has ticked down to 86 years. And the question was, am I missing anything? And so I felt I had to respond to that to say, yes, one big thing that you're missing, and that is the requirement in a very short number of years to spend thousands, probably tens of thousands of pounds extending that lease. So let me explain to you what I said. So they said, with it, you've got 6 years before you need to start really seriously thinking about extending the lease and adding another chunk of years back on. Several reasons for this. One is because even if the property is in an area where it's got good capital growth, and hey, if you're watching this, stick your questions in there, and I'll answer them after I've answered this one. But I'm going to hang around until about 9 o'clock ish, and then we can all get on with our day. So 86 years, once it ticks down to 80, it starts to get progressively more expensive. Now, short leases on flats have a detrimental effect on the value. So even if values are rising in that area, your flat with 86 or less years on the lease, when it goes down to 80 and below, you're not going to fully participate in the rise in that, because as years tick down on the lease, it actually loses money, not makes money. So, okay, if you're in a very strong area, you're going to get some growth, but you're not going to get the full capital growth, because the depreciating number of years is always going to inhibit capital growth. Now, it gets progressively more expensive to renew the lease. So once you tick down to 80 years, there's a certain cost for using that, for extending that lease. And as you tick down to 79, 78, 77, and so on, it's not a linear form. It doesn't get, increased by the same amount a year. It gets exponentially more expensive each year you delay doing it. So if you wait until 70 years rather than 80 years, it's going to cost you significantly more than it would have done if you'd have gone it at 80 years. Another issue on there is that mortgage lenders don't like flats with declining leases. And when it gets down to even 85, your choice of lenders starts diminishing, because they say, not for us. Does that mean you can't get a mortgage? Well, no, it's not quite that drastic. But as they tick down, more and more lenders just come along and say, not for us. And once you get down to, around about the 50-year mark, then it gets really, really difficult. And of course, more costly, because the lenders that still do it are not going to do market beating rates, because they don't need to. And the other thing is, it becomes more difficult to sell the property. It's not going to affect its rental potential at all, but it becomes more difficult to sell the property, because any potential buyer understands that if you haven't extended the lease, they're going to have to, and that's going to cost them tens of thousands of pounds. Now, of course, how much it costs is determined by where you live. the more affluent area you live, then it might actually not be tens, it can be hundreds of thousands of pounds. And certainly um, not necessarily 80 years, but if you've let it drift for quite a few years after that, I'm going to just attach that curtain there a bit. It's a bit of a sunny day. We like sunny days, but not if they interfere with the viewing. So, yep. So, buying an 86-year lease flat, you really need to consider the cost of extending that lease and getting it back well over 100 years, for all the reasons that I've just said, to participate fully in uplifting value, to get a full range of mortgage lenders, to be as attractive as you would want it to be whenever you want to sell. So there we are. Excuse me. So got one question in from Ryan, which we're going to deal now. If you want any more questions, or you want me to ask her any more questions, you got to put them in the chat box. If you don't put them in the chat box, I'll be off. I've got lots to do today, but always happy to give you time if you want. So let's pop Ryan's thing up there. Good to see you, Ryan. Morning. Using the cross-collateral bridging strategy. Okay, so this is where cross-collateral bridging is where you use the equity or part of the equity in a property that you already own to help you to buy, on using bridging finance, to invest in another property. Okay, so could you combine property's equity so it's treated as one property in order to overcome the minimum loan criteria on one of the properties? I'm not quite sure what you're trying to achieve there, but I can answer the question as best as I see it. Let's give a little bit more protection from that sun there. So, Ryan, if you need to group up, so let's say you've got 3 properties with significant equity in, and you need to put them together to allow you to buy a new property, then that's possible. So you can cross-collateralize on more than one property at a time, all under one loan. But I'm not quite sure whether it would achieve what you're trying to achieve, because there may be simpler and cheaper ways of doing it. But if this is a question based on a real case, then that you're trying to get through, then ping me a message. I'm going to put my easiest way is my property finance expert page. So let's find that for you. There we are. So there we are. And let's pop that in here. There we are. So just pop that in the chat there, Ryan. So if you want me to help you specifically on that, then be happy to drill down into the detail and see exactly what you're trying to do and how we can help you. So just go to the link on the Facebook there that I've done that. Great. So really appreciate your question. Now we got, here we are, Fahad. There we are. Good to see you. Fahad was at the last Ninja Investor Program course that I ran before the one just gone in. Now, and when was that? It was back in December, wasn't it? Fahad. Okay. So hope all is well. All is well. Thank you. Wondering what remortgage options there are for over 60-year-olds. Know someone whose interest-only mortgage term ends in a few years. The property has over 60% equity in it, but it's not clear if it's possible to get another 25-year interest only at this stage of life. Okay, so what we're talking about here is main residence mortgages, and there's been a big shift in emphasis over the last 10 or so years since the credit crunch. So prior to the credit crunch, interest-only main residence mortgages were the norm, uh, principally because going back into the 80s and 90s, they were backed up by an investment endowment mortgage, which proved to be spectacularly bad investments. And the aim at the beginning was to not only pay your mortgage but give you an excess lump sum, which sounded quite um, uh, plausible and desirable, for pretty much the same monthly payment, combined monthly payment, as a repayment mortgage. Uh, Problem was, as time developed, that the performance of these investments dropped off dramatically. So far from having your mortgage paid off plus a lump sum, there wasn't enough to pay your mortgage. So you had a mortgage shortfall, which was, of course, completely the opposite outcome that was intended. So in the early 2000s, they fell dramatically out of favour and people reverted to repayment mortgages. In the aftermath of the credit crunch, the FCA leaned very heavily on lenders to say that, hey, we don't want you giving all this risk to people in their own homes that they get to the end of their mortgage like this and they haven't paid it off. So pretty much interest only main residence mortgage have been stamped on, with a few exceptions. So here's the issue. They're going to have great difficulty getting another 25-year mortgage when they're already in their 60s. For the very simple reason is their income is unlikely to remain constant at its present level, assuming they're still working, for that period of time. So lenders have moved on a bit from saying, well, everyone retires at 65. So we're only going to give you a mortgage, a main residence mortgage, up to 65. So they are more flexible on that, but that is often determined by occupation. And the more manual someone's occupation, the less likely they are to want to extend into later life, because it's much harder to carry on doing manual work when you're in your 70s and certainly into your 80s than it is maybe desk bound work. So occupation is going to have an issue there. But what they've got to do really is there will be some options, but not for that sort of thing. So the real thing here, Fahad, is to get into a process of down paying the mortgage, with the eventual aim to downsize as soon as it's realistically possible. I've just seen Barry's just popped in with a ex-brickie here, knackered by 60. Yeah, absolutely. Physical work takes a toll on the body. And you don't get many 80-year-old brickies around for precisely that reason. So lenders are very wary about giving you an income too far into your retirement years, because your income is going to drop onto whatever your pension income is going to be. And most people don't earn as a pension what they used to earn when they were working. They exist on a smaller salary or smaller earnings. So the game plan really is you could probably get a new lender to give you a mortgage. It's more likely to be on a repayment basis rather than interest only, Fahad. And they very clearly want to be looking to pay down that mortgage and sell that house and move somewhere where they can actually buy mortgage free. That really has got to be the aim. It's good that they've got 60% equity, but they've still got a 40% mortgage to pay off. So really, they probably want to be rid of that mortgage within the next 10 years by a combination of A, switching to repayment, and B, downsizing to pay off the mortgage and living in a smaller property mortgage free. Need some help on that? You know where to get in touch with me. We're already in contact. Thanks for your question. A few more questions coming in here now. Going to pick up this one here. JC, there we are. Good to see you back again. Do you think there'll be a property crash by the end of the year or early 2022? Honestly, no idea. And more to the point, neither does anyone else. This whole thing about property crash, property boom, you know, it's almost impossible to predict with any accuracy where it's going. And let me give you a for instance. Now, just over a year ago, in the early days of lockdown 1, I watched a podcast by Savills, estate agents. Now, you know, if you want credibility among estate agents, you know, Savills are there right at the center of that, you know, immensely credible agent. Now, somewhere in the bowels of their head office, they have a statistician. They have their chief statistician, and they wheeled him out on Zoom on a webinar, and he went through about 20 minutes of his predictions for 2020 based on the fact that we'd just gone into lockdown. The economy had just completely shut down. Now, and he dragged in a lot of slides with a lot of historical references to what property had done in previous recessions. And, you know, let's not forget that in lockdown 1, we had the severest recession for over 300 years. The economy shrank by about something like 20%. Now, if anyone can predict the future, it's going to be Savills' chief statistician. And what did he say was the outcome for property? Then he predicted by December 2020, it would have not crashed is the wrong word. You know, it's too emotive word. A reduction in values by something between 5 to 15%. Now, with all his knowledge on statistics, reading the market as best as he could, that was his prediction. What happened? Precisely opposite. So if you're thinking now, can we predict the same thing happening at the end of this year or early 22? Who knows? And listen, if the top statistician, who probably earns a fair old wedge from Savills, can't work out what's going to happen, you got no chance of me trying to predict it. So no idea, mate. Absolutely no idea. Nor has anyone else that says they has, by the way. They ain't got any idea either. They're just guessing. You know, it's either going to be an uneducated or at best an educated guess. And, you know, we've got to see with the Savills thing I just told you about how wrong even educated guesses can be. Okay. Kat, there we are. Good to see you. Yeah, we've interacted a couple of times, so good to see you. How can you recycle the equity out of your residential property? Okay. So, well, residential properties are all about income. So the size of mortgage you get on a residential property that you live in is related precisely to how much you earn. And this also stems back from the credit crunch, when after that, along with effectively, if not completely, banning interest-only main residence mortgages, the FCA come out with this overarching thing of responsible lending. So that is a very heavy stick to beat mortgage lenders with, to say, don't lend people more than their income reasonably suggests they can afford. Now, and the thinking behind that is to keep people safe. It's no point giving people a bigger mortgage. They get into trouble, can't repay it. Lender has to repossess them. Now they've got no home. So that's not a good outcome. Equally, as we were looking at with Fahad's situation, giving people a mortgage where when they reach retirement age, they haven't paid it off. Oops, dropped my phone. Haven't paid it off is equally not a good outcome. So yeah, you've got to, and this is a common situation that you find yourself in, Kat, that you've got a chunky old house value there, but your income's not that big, so you can't get a big mortgage. Yeah, okay. So if you're using traditional methods, there's no way that you're going to be able to pull out a chunk of that money on an ongoing basis. But there is an angle by which you could do it on a short-term basis. Now, you have to decide whether you're prepared to take that level of risk. So, and it's what we talked about earlier with, let me just put it up, with Ryan's thing, is cross-collateral bridging. So you can, on a short-term basis, clearly at a higher cost of than a main residence mortgage, you can borrow some of the equity out of your property to make an investment. But what's not going to work is if you just want to use that as a deposit, because bridging is only short term. So what would work, the only way it would work, is if you bought a property that you could do up, add value, refinance, and pay back to put you in the position where you've got the same mortgage that you've got now. So that really is the only way. Now, you may or may not want to do those types of things. If you're new in property, which from our chats you're fairly new in property, you don't necessarily want to be getting involved in big refurb projects. But that's the only way really you can do it, because no lender is going to give you a bigger mortgage on the property you live in than your basic rate earner's salary entitles you to. If they did, then the FCA would come down on them like a ton of bricks. And you could understand why, because they're putting you in the predicament that you could end up taking too big a mortgage that your income can't afford to pay, or any future unforeseen changes to your income means you can't afford to pay. You end up getting repossessed and you lose all that equity. So it's not an ideal situation, certainly. But you know, if you want to drill down in more detail with me, I'm going to put a video there that you can watch about cross-collateral bridging and using equity. Let's see if we can find that for you. So watch that video. Here we are. Found it here. Just copying and pasting that. Popping that in there. So there we are then, Kat. Watch that video, and if you want to hook up with me, and you know, we'll chat or message about your options on there. But yeah, it's not the easiest thing to overcome. Good, but thanks for your question. How are we? Making sure we haven't got. Here we are. Okay, so we've got a Facebook user here. So Facebook user means that someone hasn't given permission for StreamYard to publish their name. If you're coming through Facebook and not YouTube, you have to do that. And if you don't do that, it protects your identity by just saying Facebook user. Can you get a mortgage on land? No. Simple question. No, you can't. Why is that? Because you can't live on land. So mortgage lenders lend on property that either you can live in or you can rent out. You can't rent out land, or not for those purposes. If you wanted to rent out land for people to park their tents or caravans on, well, that's a commercial mortgage based on your business plan. That's a different thing. However, if you want to, why would you want to get a mortgage on land? Now, if you want to build your own house on it to live in, then you can get self-build mortgages. So they don't actually lend on the land as such, but they lend you the money to help you buy the land and build a house on it, not just the land. And if you're wanting to do a commercial development, so buy land, build a property on it, and then sell it for a profit, mortgage lenders are not going to touch anything like that. That's development finance. So not quite sure on why you would want to borrow money on land, but I've tried to cover each of those aspects there. The sun's getting brighter all the time. There we are. But thanks for your question. Here we are, Carlo. There we are. So someone else that's Carlo. You're going to meet Clive in a couple of weeks' time because he's also. You're both going to the Heathrow Ninja Investor Program in 2 weeks' time. Looking at one of the last questions about remortgaging your residential home to remove equity, says Carlo. What do lenders look at on a buy-to-let if you've maxed out paying for your resi? Yeah, okay. Well, what they look for, Carlo, is predominantly predominantly the rental income, because they're looking for the rental income to pay for the buy-to-let mortgage, not your personal income. So it doesn't really have any effect on it. Okay, some of them have thresholds like you got to earn 25,000 a year. Some don't have that, but really doesn't have much effect at all, because buy-to-let mortgages are based predominantly on the rental income of the property, not your personal income. So if you've maxed out on your resi, that's not going to be a barrier to you getting buy-to-let mortgages. Good question. So there we are. Fahad's back. There we are. So if lenders are encouraged not to offer interest-only mortgages, why are the majority of buy-to-let mortgages interest-only? Okay, good question. But you're slightly missing the point. Buy-to-let, the FCA discourage mortgage lenders offering interest-only mortgages on main residences, Fahad. Now, because it's your home, and they want you to be able to live in your home as long as you choose to, not be forced to sell it at the end of your mortgage period, interest-only mortgage period, because you couldn't refinance or pay it off or whatever. Now, buy-to-let mortgages are interest-only because you don't live in them. And if you want to sell off your buy-to-let mortgage at the end of the mortgage term, you can. And it makes absolutely not a jot of difference to you, to the property you live in. So the risk of unpaid capital, of course, still applies, but the consequences are radically different. The consequences of an interest only on your main residence is you can't continue living in the place that's been your home for however many years. The consequences of a buy-to-let mortgage is you sell it and carry on living unaffectedly. So the last bit, assume this is because the main resident, they're not main residents in income. Yeah. So I think you knew the answer. We just wanted clarity, but there we are. So for anyone else, I explained the difference. Good. Have we got anything else? Barry, there we are. Barry, the ex-brickie. Nice to see you, Barry. Do you think there's a future in buy-to-let? Government taxation on buy-to-let seems unfair and harsh, and shows no signs of easing. Well, now, is there a future in buying property to invest in? Let's broaden that out yes, there is. But would you have to consider other angles other than straightforward, I'll rent it to a single tenant on an AST? You may well do. Now, there are a myriad of opportunities to make money from investing in property, Barry. The most basic one is buy a house, stick a tenant in it on a single AST, and take the rental income. Now, you're right that it's become progressively less attractive since 2016, when a raft of measures were introduced to make it less profitable. in one way. Now, there are a number of different ways to do different things in property. You can rent to multiple people. You can rent, you can lease your property out to another organisation who'll take care of the rent. I've done a video on that. Let me see if I can find that one for you. It's called the ultimate. I called it the ultimate hands-off strategy. Let's see if we can find that one. Just scrolling through some of the videos here. Here we are, got it. Let me pop that in here for you. Hop off and watch this when we're done here today. Barry, there we are. I'm just going to poke that in the comments now. There you go. So that's one way really to get around all the taxation and other things. You know, you can potentially do it in your own name, in a limited company, not your own name. That alters the way it's taxed. You can do short-term letting. You can do holiday lets. You can use. You can go into commercial or semi-commercial because that doesn't have the same legislation. So you may have to rethink the way you rent your properties out. But is there a future in investing in property as and renting it out? Yeah, I think there is, but it might not be exactly the same as it was previously. Thanks for your question, Barry, by the way. So here we are, another of our regulars, Gorilla Investor. Good to see you back again. If you have a property on a purchase lease option, so you've got the opportunity but not the obligation to buy it, and it's an assignable, in other words, you can pass that on to someone else to take over. Can the person you assign the PLO to, the purchase lease option, purchase the property on a buy-to-let mortgage since they don't have a relationship to the vendor? Okay, so I did a video. I'm going to pop that one in there as well to say why you can't buy a buy-to-let mortgage. Why you can't use a buy-to-let mortgage to exercise a lease option because in lender's view it's not an arm's length transaction. And that, now let me just find that video so you can so anyone that's thinking, well, what's that all about? They can find that out. Let me just see where I can find that. There we are. Found that one. Right. So for anyone that's thinking, well, why can't you use a mortgage to purchase something you've had a purchase lease option on? Watch that video. There's your answer. Now, your question then is, if you then effectively sell that lease option on to a different person who hasn't had a relationship with the current owner, does that get round it? No. The reason for that is because now the new owner of the lease option has that relationship. So they take over your relationship, even if it's not for the same time frame. They've still got a relationship with the owner of the property, the vendor. So no, you still can't use it, even if you do that. You've got to buy it cash or bridge in and then get a mortgage once you've taken the relationship with the seller out of the picture. Thanks for your question. Barry says he agrees. Yeah, good. Glad we're in agreement there. Can you lend against a lease option property? No, because you don't own it. So any properties, any loan secured on a property, thanks for your question, Featherman, by the way. Any loan secured on a property is lent to the person or entity whose name's on the deeds. So if you've got a lease option, your name isn't on the deeds. The current owner's name's on the deeds. They can borrow property. They can borrow money against it. You can't, because you can't offer security because you don't own it. Good. So simple question now. Okay. So there we are. Looks like we're at the end of this session. So unless someone sneaks in with a late question, because if they do, I'll answer it. Otherwise, we'll be done. And we're back next week with a whole new Q&A. We are, see, it happens, doesn't it? Just when I was going to wrap up, someone hops in there with the question. And of course, I feel honor bound to answer it. So I'm going to do that. Then we got two. Yeah, Guerrilla Investors sneaked in with another one there. We'll do that one because that's a quick one first. So, yeah, you sneaked in there. Do mortgage lenders allow you to sell your property via a purchase lease option? Yeah, there's no issue there, because if you want to sell you're just selling it. The fact you're selling it under a different agreement doesn't really affect mortgage lenders. So, yeah, that's not an issue. Answer that one quickly. Yeah, and thanks for sneaking that in. There's the other one. There's another Facebook user. Excuse me. So I'll drill down a bit later and see who who's answering that, and then we'll work from there. And I'll connect with you if appropriate. Generally avoids bringing. I think that's bridging. Generally avoid bridging because of the cost. Yeah. Okay, that's fair enough. I'm still here, by the way. It's a bit of a bigger question, but yeah, you wouldn't use bridging unless you could make a significantly bigger profit on the deal than the cost of the bridging. That's very clear. Otherwise, there'd be no point. What would be the average cost for bridging for 330? So broadly speaking, including fees, interest, for 6 months, probably cost you about 10%, roughly. So might come in a bit under that, but broadly speaking, 10%. So it's going to cost you about 30 grand to borrow for 6 months. A bit longer if it's 12 months. Especially if you're new to bridging, not to buy to let. Not going to affect the cost overly. Also, timescales. Is it possible to get bridging in 4 to 5 weeks? Absolutely it is. Let me tell you why. Because bridging loans are used extensively to fund auction purchases where you only get 28 days to complete. Now, we've brokered literally hundreds of bridging loans over the last 10 years. And we know that almost every bridger is geared up to release the money in 14 to 28 days. So, yeah. So property prices around 450. After refurb, you expect it to be worth about 600. Would you recommend a mortgage for this specific deal and refinance? No, I absolutely would not recommend a mortgage, because you would be obtaining a mortgage. The first one, you would be obtaining a mortgage by fraudulent means, because if you disclosed your intention to redeem that mortgage a few months later, they kick out your application. Every mortgage lender would do that. I've done a video on this as well. Let me find this one. This is a really important point. You don't want to be going down this route of trying to avoid bridging on the cost and using a buy-to-let mortgage that you can only get by deceiving the lender as to your true intent. Not a smart move. Let me find that. Yep, here we go. Again with another property finance tip. And what is it this week? It's about... So I seriously suggest you watch that video to understand why that's a really bad idea. So you either use cash or use bridging if you're going to buy it, refurb it and refinance it, or you don't do the deal. Quite simply. Thanks for your question. I'll pick up with you the name on it. Another Facebook user. 2 people both have an income of less than 20,000. Can they qualify for a buy-to-let mortgage by submitting a joint application? Yep, yes, they can. So it's the applicants on a buy-to-let mortgage need to have 25%, 25,000 income. So yeah, can do that. There we are. Once again, it looks like we're at the end, and maybe you can watch this on the replay in whichever group. So let me know if you've done that. Just put #replay in there. So thanks for dropping in, either live for all of it, live for part of it, and maybe you caught the rest on a replay, or maybe you're watching the replay, however way you dropped in, whichever way you dropped in. Thank you, appreciate it. So I'm going to be back next Monday, 8:30, and we're going to do it all again. Barry says, keep up the good work. Well, I sure intend to, Barry. Thanks for that. So have a fantastic week. I'm going to be off to Birmingham this coming weekend, Saturday the 15th. I'll be there with two other great speakers, Sue Sims and Christine Janaway, and we're going to be doing the Buy-Refurb-Refinance Summit. I'll just pop that link in there again if you didn't see that. Here we are at www.brsummit.com. There we are. Hope to see you there. Great. So have a great week. See you next week.